Hello there, welcome to Genesis Models. My name is Bobby Waldron and welcome to the Avenger build. Now, coming up in this episode, we will be really sort of just focusing on our figures that we have here. We have some nice sort of resin miniatures that we brought separately to nicely go into our Avenger here, and we're basically going to be showing you highlights, washes, dry brushing, spraying them, you know, and getting our figures looking rather cool to go in our model. And it is a really it's a way I do figures that is quick, it's easy, but it is so effective. It's not at a professional level really, to be honest with you. It just makes it so effective but so easy. So let's crack on. I want to now kind of move along with our pilot, because actually, you know, we need to make sure that they fit. The problem is, I mean, as much as these resin pieces are really nice, getting them to fit can be a little bit of a nightmare. I've already had a go at our gunner just here, and I've had to do all sorts of stuff to sort of get him to fit. I've actually had to sand his, you know, shoulders down either side. You could see how I've sanded these areas flat, right? I mean, it might not look good sort of not actually in there and out of the actual model, but when we actually put it into the model, you know, his arm's going to be right up against this MG, and you're not going to see that kind of flat spot that I've had to sand, but it gets them to fit, right? So I'm going to do the pilot next. Now this is resin, right? So normal rules apply with resin. You sort of want to, you know, when you get it out the bag, just you know, put it in some lukewarm water, a bit of washing up liquid, get a toothbrush out, brush it down, get all this sort of mold release agents off there, and they will be good to start gluing them together. Now we've got all our pieces. What I like to do just to get started is a very light gluing of super glue. Right, I don't mean pour on a load of super glue that this will, you know, glue it permanently into position. Just enough so it just lightly glues it. That's probably a little bit too much, so I'm just going to get a little bit off, right, and then we just sort of lightly glue it in position, hold that, and it's all about sort of we're probably going to maybe have to break it apart or something like that, maybe to get it fit, but we need it together to be able to see if it's going to be able to fit. So a light little bit of gluing, so as we can easily, that's glued into place now, easily snap, and it's only going to have a nice clean break. Coming in with a blade, we can just scrape away that dried up super glue and do whatever alterations we need to do. So with our pilot now just lightly glued together, we can actually see what's going on straight away. You try and get this in here and you can see that his feet are on the pedals, but he's just not going in there. So, you know, this is where, you know, sometimes you have to do this, and that is cut off his feet. So just get out some cutters. I just want to, you know, take off as little as possible to start with. Right, with these kind of things, you know, again, better to cut off little, because it's easier to cut off more than it is to start adding stuff because you cut too much. So I'll just try this now, and you know, that is starting to fit a little bit better. His bum's still sticking out a bit, but we'll cut off pretty much all of his feet here. Right, we don't need to worry too much because we're not going to see that. It's quite tucked away, as you can see, and by just doing that, we are now in place. Now I think luckily what we have here is you know, we don't need to sort of probably do any more than that. It does look like nothing else is going to get in the way. It does look like he's, you know, fairly nicely seated. I'm kind of looking at his back and see how he's sort of leaned forward maybe a little bit too much. Maybe his bum area is maybe a little bit too pointed. So you know what, I'll get out a sanding stick and sort of sand that pointy bum area. Maybe that'll let him sit a little bit better in the seat. And this is kind of like basically, you know, I'm not going to bore you. You know, it's just kind of getting him to sit right. If you just slowly remove a little bit here and there, a little bit there, so he's just sitting right. Because we've lightly glued it, we can break his arms, break his body and his leg apart. You know, move them if we want to. Maybe we sort of don't want him sitting like that. Maybe we could have him sitting like at an angle. Change the arm positions. You know, it's just kind of getting it just the way you want it and looking good in there. Now we've got our pilot just the way we want it. I mean, you might find a few little things like this. This is where you got maybe some little gaps, maybe just in between the arms and stuff. You know, Vallejo plastic putty technique, cannot beat it, right? We've also got, you might even just see, just on his shoulder just here, there's a little hole. When it comes to things like resin casting and stuff, what can happen is little bubbles can get in there, and basically that's an air bubble hole, right? So, you know, Vallejo plastic putty technique, just injected in that hole, even sort of like around the entire arm where we've got this bit of a gap going on around it. Cotton wool bud, I should probably know this by now, but yeah, a cotton wool bud. So let's get you focusing, right? And we can just now wipe this up, which should leave behind the Vallejo plastic putty. As you can see that white line where it's just targeted exactly where the gap is. Even that little hole there is being sort of nicely filled. You may have to do a second application, because I do notice sometimes you get air bubbles after it dries, so just add another application. But this just saves things like sanding away at stuff. So I'm going to do that just basically on the arms. Now we're going to start off with the base colour. The base colour, you know, it's normally one colour and we can do the whole model in it, so it's probably good using your airbrush for this. Now I'm going to be using this colour here, which is some Sandy Yellow 028. I don't know how accurate that is, but basically I have just gone off and sprayed this all over, and it's all nice and dry. Now the whole reason for this is when you got to look, you got to kind of look at a figure, and you kind of got to see, you know, what's all the recessed areas, what's all the raised areas. Remember, it's easier to paint the recessed areas first, and then go up to the next raised level, and the next raised level, and the next raised level. If you do it the other way around, it's going to be harder to paint the recesses. So the most sort of recessed area really is his trousers and his shirt and stuff, right? And then you've got all this life jackets and straps and everything that are all raised. So I'm starting with that colour. Now, nice and easy to sort of do some, well, shall we say, nice basic painting is start with your base, which we've just done, and then we're going to move along and use some of this camo shade. This is by Citadel. It's a little bit of a green sort of wash, right? And this is going to take care of all our shadows in the clothing, and it's such an easy technique. There's no real skill involved with it. So I'm just going to get out, what is this, a number 4 paintbrush. It's just by AK, but it's just a nice simple paintbrush, and we dip in to our camo shade. And what we're going to do, right, it's that easy that, oh sorry, off camera there, all we need to do is just actually just paint this all on, and straight away what you will see, right, is it starts to flow in all those recesses, right, and sort of kind of almost leaves all our sort of raised areas sort of nice and clean, right? It does act as a bit of a filter in a way, and does change the colour to a bit of a greener colour, but don't worry about that. The highlighting stage, what we'll do next, which I'll show you, kind of takes care of all that. Oh, I didn't want to get it on its helmet, right, sorry, I'll have to sort of clean that up. So I'll just get out like a clean paintbrush later. I wanted to leave the helmet clean because I wanted to put a different colour wash on that, just to sort of show you how, you know, if you go off and sort of put this camo green shade on, say, his clothing, right, even though we've used Sandy Yellow, right, I was going to go off and use Agrax Earthshave for his head, which would then, although it would give us a different colour, because it kind of acts as a bit of a filter and changes the colour itself, Right, so now we've got all that done there. We do need to leave it to dry. We don't want to be sort of mixing anything in the highlighting stage with the wash. The wash really needs to dry, so that's going to maybe take a good 15-30 minutes to do that. So hopefully, as you can see already, by just putting that wash on, our base colour has nicely got some nice shadows going on there. It's bringing out the detail quite nicely. But let's just sort of enhance that a little bit more. We're going to do a bit of dry brushing. Dry brushing is easy, but don't forget, you know, there is a right way of doing it. So what we're going to do here, I've got some Citadel paints. I mean, admittedly, when it comes to brush painting, I like to use Citadel. We've got Karak stone, right, and all we're going to do is just dip in here, and on a kitchen paper towel or whatever, we're just going to sort of nicely work it into the bristles and make it technically a bit of a dry brush. Right, so what will happen is, if we start to, you know, just kind of like dry brush across here, what will happen is, if you sort of start off light and careful and just do lots and lots of brushes, what it will do is it will pick up on all those raised areas. And hopefully what you can see so far is how it starts to highlight things. Right, I just did the back because it was a nice place to sort of show an example, but like kind of coming along, doing its clothing and everything, right, it just starts to give those nice highlights. Right, try and get into all the sort of nooks and crannies if you can, and hopefully you can see how his clothes are now sort of being highlighted, making it a little bit more interesting and giving a bit more detail. Make sure you get the collar as well. That's sort of a nice sort of point there to sort of show off. And that is basically it. What you just want to remember with dry brushing is, you know, take it as dry brushing. You want your brush to be really sort of dry. You want to be going off and literally, you know, you're brushing against it like this for like maybe 20 passes in a single area, right? You don't want it to be that wet that, you know, maybe like 3 passes you kind of get the paint on, right? Because it'll come across as being a bit sharp. You might have like looks like brush strokes and stuff, but by, you know, having it sort of nice and dry and you're taking about 20 passes for each bit, it kind of puts a nice feathered dry brush down and nicely sort of feathers it in, right? And hopefully you're sort of liking the results. Really sort of nice and basic, and that there really in all honesty is just probably the sort of easiest but most effective way of painting miniatures, in my own opinion. I mean, really, what we've done there, a base coat, spraying it down, then we put a wash on, that was just slapping it on, and then just dry brushing it. It's so easy, but you know, it is an effective way of doing a miniature, right? But that gets our big areas. We've then got all these sort of intricate details. How do we do that? Well, that's going to require a bit of highlighting and stuff like that for those areas. So I'll get this all dry brushed up. Now the next part on our miniature here is we want to work our way up to the next raised bit, right? So as you can see, we've done all our, you know, clothy area, but the next raised bit is probably right here. It is, I think it's his life jacket, and then as you can see, you then got sort of like straps and stuff on top of that, which would be the next raised area. So let's do the life jacket first, right? So what I've got here is a nice yellow. This is Avaland Sunset. It's kind of a bit of a dirty yellow, right? Now we're going to be brush painting here, so we don't want to be getting any brush strokes. So what I like to use actually is some homebrew finish to mix these. So just pop a bit down there and we'll get a bit of our paint, right, and we can mix it in to sort of give us a thinner version of the paint, a nice sort of consistency in which it's going to brush down, right, but it's going to give us a bit of coverage. So if I now just sort of brush this on here, no, that's a little bit too thin, so let's add a little bit more paint to our little mixture here. I know I should probably be using a palette or something, but I don't mind. and that's around about, maybe actually a little bit more paint actually. That is a little bit on the thin side, so it doesn't matter just to keep mixing, you know, and just get it just right. Right, and then that's a lot better, and we just want to sort of nice and carefully not go on areas that we've already painted and stuff. And I'm just trying to keep you on camera and concentrate at painting at the same time, and we're just painting this in. But because we're going to do the straps and everything after doing this colour, we don't have to worry if we accidentally go onto those areas. Right, we're painting them probably next. Right, and we just want to now go around and paint our yellow in. Now that there, once it's dried, probably one more coat, maybe two, will give us some good coverage on that. And that's just basic paint brushing, just kind of thinning your paints so as you don't get brush strokes. With our life jacket now looking nicely with some coverage, we want the life jacket to also have that nice bit of interest of shadows and highlights, right? But we can't come in with a dry brush because it's just too small of an area to do that. So what we do here, well actually the second stage is pretty much the same, right? This time we're going to come in with a yellow shade here by Citadel, right? And we're going to place this on in the same manner as we did for our first colour. Right, we're just gonna nicely paint this on. Right, we don't have to worry about again getting on any straps or any part that we haven't painted yet. Right, hopefully I'm keeping you on camera there, and just work our way along. And what you'll see is, again, this will go into the nooks and crannies and attract to any recessed or raised areas to bring out any sort of shadows and create interest just the same. Right, and again you want to leave this to nicely dry before you move on to the next stage, because you don't want to be moving your wash about or anything like that. Now this is where it gets a little bit tricky, right? The highlights, because we're not dry brushing is nice and easy on big bits, but you know, when you got to get in there with a paintbrush, the highlights is kind of more about the mixture and building up your layers of a highlight, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to come in back in with Avaland Sunset, right? We're going to come in with this colour because really, as much as it's the same colour we've used here, the thing is our yellow shade here has basically created a bit of a filter on there and changed the colour itself. It's made it a bit of a darker, more sort of orangey sort of colour, right? So this technically will look different to what we've ended up with our shade on there. So we're going to now mix this with some of our homebrew thinners, but we want to mix it so as it needs to be, you know, kind of nice and thin. We're not after coverage, right? Forget about coverage and painting it in and getting good coverage. This is about making a highlight. We want it to be feathering in, right? We want it to be gradually building up and getting brighter and brighter, right? So we just want to sort of make sure that we've got quite a nice thin mixture, right? And I'm just making sure I've got it to start off with, definitely anyway. So what we want to do here is, hopefully I can get you on camera and do this because it's a bit tricky, right? We want to now sort of start to paint in sort of like those flat areas, right? And that maybe need to be a bit thinner, right? So we want it to be sort of nice and thin so as it looks a little bit sort of feathered in, almost like you've sprayed it, right? And I'm just doing those flat areas, right? And I'm leaving, you know, where the dark washy areas are, where we've had it go into the creases and stuff, because that makes nice shadows. And again, I'm just going to try and, you know, just paint this area again, trying to stay away from those nice shadowy areas that's been made. If you make a mistake, clean your paintbrush and maybe sort of try and suck up that paint that you've just sort of put down, because I just did a little bit down. I want to just show that shadow there, right? And then what you want to do is let it dry. I'll just do that little bit just to show you, and just quickly cut to air, because what we're going to do now is basically using that same mixture, we're going to paint in the same area but make it smaller, right? And maybe actually sort of what I'm going to try and do is maybe sort of try and show that one side's maybe getting a bit more light and sun than the other. So I'm going to try and sort of maybe paint this side here, his left side, right, to sort of maybe make this yellow become and look a little bit more yellow, right? And hopefully, as you can see there, I've only painted, you can just see that on camera where it's looking a little bit more yellow now, and this side is just going to hopefully gradually feather across and be darker on his right side, and on his left side we'll get more and more yellow and brighter. Now that's like our first two layers we put down. Again, we can wait for it to dry, right? Try and speed it up with the camera here. There we go, hopefully that's nice and quick. And then I can come in again, right? And this time again we're going to put our third layer on, but I'm going to concentrate with our third layer being more to his left side, so his left side is just going to look more and more brighter. So, you know, I'm only going to come over a little bit this time, right? And hopefully you can see on camera there, I've just kind of brought that more to the left side, and hopefully what you're seeing is this kind of transition of like his right side is looking a little bit dark, but over his left side it's getting brighter and brighter, as if like there's sunlight, you know, coming down on that area. And it just gives us, hopefully, as you can see, by just not even changing the colors, we've not even changed the colors, we've just got a really sort of transparent bit of paint that goes down looking quite feathered. And because we're building it up and making it have more and more coverage as we build up in the layers, it gets brighter and brighter and brighter, right? And that is kind of, there's 3 layers, that's basically some nice basic sort of highlights. But you could go off and get out some more colors. I mean, this is a bit of a dirty yellow kind of color, well, we could go off and get like a really bright yellow. Let's see if I've actually got one. Just found one. Right, we have this Flash Gits yellow. I mean, flipping hell, come on, Games Workshop, I mean, the names for your colors are just crazy. Which this one doesn't look all too good, but we'll see what we can do with it. But it's a nice light yellow color, so I'm just getting some of that. It needs a bit of a stir, this one, right? I haven't used it for some time, right? So just getting a bit of this, right? And what we're going to do is try and create a real nice sharp bright highlight, right? So hopefully this will work, because this paint, as you can see, that is a much more brighter yellow. Now this is like coming in with some serious highlighting, so you really don't want to go overboard with this. This is maybe like edges, so maybe if we can just maybe paint a bit of an edge, really don't go overboard with it, right? Hopefully, you know, I mean, really, you know, just getting those corners. I mean, maybe that's as far as you want to go, that little very sharp sort of very bright yellow just slightly in those corners. That is probably all you want. But then you also need to think that, you know, this guy's in a cockpit, you know, maybe up here we could probably go quite strong with that really bright yellow on the edges, because that's where you're going to get some light, and it'll probably be more bright up in this area. Just think about where the sun's coming from. But there you go, some nice sort of basic feathering in your highlights, doing some sharp highlights, you know, changing the color if you need to, and that's pretty much it now. I mean, really, I can go off now and I can do as I've already done here, you know, I've done this one, right, you know, kind of do the same with the whites, do the same with the face, do the same with the helmet, the whole thing, even the face. I know the faces might sound like they're hard, but really it's the same thing. It's just, you know, doing the cheeks and the brow and the nose, you know, you kind of build up your colors. And do the same sort of thing, but we could probably go a little bit more advanced with figures, maybe in a separate video or something. But for now, that's just some nice basic painting to get our crew in our Avenger. So sadly, that is the end of episode 3. Now in episode 4, you know, I mean, I did sort of promise it in this episode, but I didn't get around to it. But yeah, we are going to be getting the cockpit out. We are going to be, you know, doing all the washes, the pigments, the chipping, and all this stuff to get it all nicely looking good for our pilots to go in, and hopefully we might get it nicely sort of bringing those fuselage halves together. But hopefully you've enjoyed this episode. Hopefully look forward to the next episode. But as always, until next time, my name is Bob Waldron, Suggested Models, and I'll see you in the next episode.